So when you harvest your honey, your bees are going to get more protective, so that's when you're going to definitely want to have a smoker. Definitely your veil, because you always wear your veil because you're a safe beekeeper. And they're going to be more inclined to be protective. So just keep that in mind when you're taking honey from them at the end of the season in late August, early September. Just make sure you keep your smoker lit and your gloves on. And you definitely want to keep your honey, you want to keep your brood chamber from getting honey bound. So by doing that, you just keep the honey, you keep adding honey supers on top so that you can harvest the honey on the top and you don't have to worry about what's going on down here. You want to harvest your honey before it gets cold, just because the honey flows out easier. It's a pain in the neck to try to harvest honey at the end of September or early October. It's really hard. So it's nice to have a nice warm garage. You want to keep it bee tight so that bees can't get in, because they'll come in. It smells incredible and they'll be attracted to that smell. So make sure the windows are closed and the garage doors closed, or wherever you're doing it is nice and bee tight. You want to make sure that your bees have 6 to 8 frames, the big frames, for over the winter. And wintering is very specific, and there's a method for it that's a whole class. They condense their nest size. So you'll have, going into winter, you should have a box with bees on the bottom and a box with honey on the top. Still 2 boxes. Your queen excluder never stays on over the winter. You want that off. You want that off as soon as you harvest your honey. That queen excluder comes right off. You want to make sure that your equipment in your bee yard is clean. If you spill honey or you actually accidentally stick your hive tool in a frame that is filled with honey and it drips out, you just kind of want to clean it up. Especially in the fall, it will attract every wasp, every bee in the neighborhood, and you'll have a very interesting event in your bee yard. So you want to just make sure that you keep everything cleaned up. When you're finished, and now you have your honey super, and it's been extracted. So you have this box, it's been extracted, and you're going to put this box back on a strong colony to let them clean these wet frames because they're sticky with honey. You're going to let the bees clean this up. And so what you're going to do is you're going to have these 2 boxes. And on the top of those 2 boxes, you just want to raise, you want the bees to think that the honey super that's wet that you're putting on is not part of their nest. That way they don't go up there and have any activity other than cleaning activity. So you just want them to clean up there. So on top of your 2 boxes, you put an empty box just like this with no frames. You just set that on top of your strong colony. You don't want to do this on a weak colony because it will, again, attract robber bees to that weak colony. So you make sure that the colony is nice and healthy and strong. You put that down, and then you put the wet box full of frames on top of here, and then put the lid on and let it sit for a couple of days. And the bees will clean it all up and lick it dry. You can go out and check and they'll clean it dry as a bone. It's pretty amazing. They'll clean it all up, and then you can take it off and store it for winter. So that you don't want to leave that on for very long, because if you do, the bees will start to put honey back in it. So once they get it all clean and ready to go, then they'll start again. So you don't want them to do that. And there's a...
You take both of those off once you get the...
Yes. Yeah, so you're just going to leave this on for a few days, and then you're going to take both of these boxes off. Yeah. And store them for the winter. There's a pest of beeswax that's called wax moth, and you'll want to get familiar with wax moth. All of these pests are normal and just part of beekeeping life, and you'll want to know how to manage them. And wax moth is pervasive in stored beeswax. So you just want to learn how to manage that. And there are lots of different ways. And as the year progresses, we'll talk more about it. I'm glad that's not what my winter colonies look like. That's way too much snow. Way too much snow. So these are obviously single brood chambers that probably have emergency feed on top. They're nicely insulated on one side with the snow, right? They just need a place for the bees to escape. In Utah, we don't wrap our hives with anything to overwinter them because the temperature fluctuates so much. So one day it'll be 10 degrees, and then the next day it'll be 45 degrees and kind of sunny. And on those 45-degree sunny days, the bees will come out. And we don't wrap them because the wrap increases the temperature inside the hive and creates too much activity. So during the cold times, they don't cluster tight enough. So in a way, wrapping is counterproductive in Utah. So you just have to get with your associations and find out what works best for them for this area, for your bees for this area. So you want to make sure you leave them enough honey. You want to provide ventilation so that there's airflow in your bees. And this is in the winter. This is winter, just kind of a winter overview. The screen bottom boards provide some nice ventilation, and then you just can prop the top up with popsicle sticks. You can make feeding boards, like I was saying, with dry sugar or fondant. Some people they get worried about if their bees are alive or not, and usually what you do is be a proactive beekeeper, know what's happening in their biology and think ahead, and then you can just trust that they're alive in there. Some people like to knock on the box and listen, and sometimes they'll hum, but sometimes they won't. Sometimes they're just really quiet no matter what you do, and you don't want to jostle them around too much in the winter. Don't open them too late in the winter. It's really, really tempting to get in there and look and see if they're alive. And sometimes they're down low and you can't see them. And you don't want to get in there in the winter and change the air temperature. It's really, really hard on them to try to bring that temperature back up inside the hive. So you just want to leave them alone in the winter. And the hive tip check, if you want to make sure that you have enough honey. And so you just pick up the back of the hive and lift it. And if it's light, then you can start stimulation feeding. This is for late winter feeding. In the fall, you want to pick that up, and you shouldn't be able to move it. It should be nice and heavy. Okay? And so that tip check, it will kind of determine when you need to start feeding. And once you start feeding in the winter, like I was saying before, you still have to continue to feed. So to summarize, beekeeping's local. So align yourself with some local beekeepers. We're on Facebook, myself and Tom Hopkins and our state bee inspector, and the Idaho Beekeeping Facebook website is getting populated with more and more beekeepers, and you can find that on it's Facebook, www.facebook.com/groups/Idaho Queen Cups, and the Idaho is with a capital I. And so we discussed your basic equipment in bee handling, talked about where you were going to get your bees from. Are you going to get a package? Are you going to get a nuke? And when you do get the package and the nuke, you're going to make sure that you feed them so that they'll reward you with a nice honey harvest at the end of the season. And winterizing.
You know, I don't know if the D&B guys shown.
Oh yes, this is the screen bottom board. So the one that we have here is solid. And this is the screen bottom board, and this is used for IPM. It's integrated pest management, and this is for varroa mite, so that if the varroa mites fall off of the bees, they'll fall through here. And you have lots to learn about varroa mite. That's one thing that I would read up on and get familiar with. If you have bees, then you have these mites, and you have to decide how you are going to manage them. Which part? It's VARROA, the varroa mite. Yes?
Back to the end of winter feeding again.
Yes.
What kind of constitutes the end of winter feeding, or when is too soon? Like now, is that too soon?
Now would be a little bit too soon. You want to be within about 6 weeks of the beginning of a nectar flower bloom. So I'm assuming that your first bloom is dandelion, is that right? Yeah. Yeah, so about mid-April for us is when we get that first bloom. Yes?
Does anybody ever know what the Canyon County having ordinances?
They don't. They don't.
You can often go on your state extension, and they'll have, or sometimes it varies county to county or city to city, but usually that information's available on the website through the Department of Ag. You can just call them and see. They usually have information. So again, I thank you for coming.